Cool, wonderful. So it looks like we have a good number of folks here. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Madeline, and I'm going to be your host for today's and for the next couple webinars in our Level Up series. The goal of this series is for you to expand your skill set and make sure you're getting the most out of Column. So today we're going to be covering financial dashboards and analytics, but before we get into it, just a couple of opening notes. This is our first installment of this series. So when we're done here, you're going to receive an email asking for feedback, and I would love it if you could let me know what you enjoyed and what you didn't enjoy, so that way you can get the biggest value out of these going forward. Also, throughout this webinar, please use the Q&A function to submit any questions, and we will get to those at the end. And finally, we are recording this, so if you have any friends or colleagues that weren't able to make it today, please feel free to share it out if you think they would find it interesting. I also think some introductions are in order. So, hi, my name is Madeline Black, and I'm Column's Field Marketing Manager. I often find myself at conferences, working with publishers, and hosting educational workshops similar to the one that we'll be going through today. And I'm joined by Iris Yuan. She is Column's Senior Technical Product Manager and is focused on how Column handles payments between the advertisers and their newspapers. She's going to take us through the dashboards themselves and help us uncover what kinds of data can be found. So before we get into the specific details, I want to offer a bit of a framing for how you can start thinking about these reports. So first, I think the biggest value that you can get out of these is it's a real-time view into what's happening in your business. So instead of waiting until the end of the month or the quarter or even the year to retrospectively understand what happened in your business in the past, you can understand it right now in the present, what's going on right now. And with this kind of shortened feedback loop, you can be more agile in responding to changes and get ahead of things as they happen instead of waiting until it's too late. However, that said, you're not going to get much value from this information if you look at it in a vacuum. So the best way you can, the best way that you can use these reports is as a starting point to ask some more informed questions about what's going on at your paper. So the ways this is going to work today is that Iris is going to take us through the dashboards, and for each one, we'll discuss what kinds of questions you can ask in response to what's happening in the data. So I am going to pass things over to Iris to kick it off.
Great, thanks, Madeline. So I'm going to jump into the Column dashboard. And when you first log into Column, you will land on the Notices page. To access these financial dashboards, you will click Reports in the upper right-hand corner of your window. And for today's example, we are looking at the real dashboard for the Daily Territorial in Tucson, Arizona. Huge thanks to Marco, who is in the audience, who is giving us permission to share this with you. These reports are available for you anytime, and they allow you to see a summary of data related to your financial breakdown, notices breakdown, customer data breakdown, as well as your aging invoices. And our goal is really to help give you a bird's eye view, but also be able to drill into specific invoices and notices if you need to. So this way you can look into an individual, but also understand, the lay of the land across your business and take action or make business decisions based off of this data. So for financial breakdown data, the first report we see here that I'm sharing is the monthly notice volume for the year so far. So this tells you the number of notices actually submitted. And you can see a chart of your notice volume for the year. So, right now we only see January and February for the year. Below that, you can see the total notice volume since started using Column and the number of unpaid invoices for each month. So one thing I want to highlight here is that this notice volume report summarizes the data by default based off of the first publication run date on the notice, and then the total amount of money that notice is invoices for.
Some questions that you can ask while looking at this report. So consider how consistent is your notice volume? Is there a seasonality to it? Are there any sudden jumps or dips? Can you think of why that might be? Looking at the unpaid invoices, how far back do those go? How much do your advertisers owe you? Why might have it taken 6 months for someone to pay for a notice that ran a long time ago? Use this to understand what's going on at your paper, and maybe look at those invoices and follow up with the people who haven't paid you, because as we all know, you shouldn't not get paid for a service that you've received. So I think again, very important to take a look at these.
So that is the monthly notice volume. Now we can drill down into the notices breakdown section. And this is really going from that bird's eye view into, I have a specific notice or customer I want to look into. So here you can actually search by customer name or customer organization. If you have a unique order number that you're including on our invoices, you can search by that as well, or just by the invoice number. And the date range for this page when you first land on it is all time, but you can select the date range perhaps instead of, all time. I just want to look at this year to date or last year or last quarter. You can do that here, and the results will update for you. So say, for example, one of my customers reached out because they want to better understand the status of their affidavits. Instead of sorting through all the notices individually, I can look for this specific organization, see all the individual filers under that organization, and then sort the affidavits table to see true or false, was the affidavit uploaded? Okay, these ones are false. Maybe there's some action I need to take. And all of these columns that you see are sortable as well if you click on them. So for example, I want to see more recent notices. I just clicked on date paid, and now it's pulling up, the most recent ones from just this past week. And in addition to that, if I go back to just the all up view, I notice that there are customers here who the organization is null. You'll see that across these pages, and that just means that this is an individual rather than someone belonging to an organization.
So I think that the most powerful way that you can use this is kind of in conjunction with some of the other dashboards. So say, for example, on the previous report, you can see that there are a number of unpaid invoices from 6 months ago. You can come here and specifically see which notices were placed in that date range, so you can follow up with them about paying.
Great. And as an example, if we navigate to the customer breakdown page, this gives you another bird's eye view to see who has placed the most notices with you over time. You can also customize the date range like you could on the previous pages to see who has had the most activity. Perhaps instead of this year or all time, we want to look at last year, apply that change, and you can see the list refresh. And based off of the individual customer, as well as the kind of shared customer organization, we can see where the notice revenue is coming from for your business and make certain business decisions about your customers based off of that data.
Some of the questions that you can ask on this page is maybe the customer that's taking up most of your time is only doing a small portion of your notice volume. So you can use this to understand who your top priority customers are and make sure that you're using your time productively. You could also use the date range to see changes over time. So is someone placing less volume than they used to? You can reach out and ask why. And then finally, what are you doing to retain these customers? For the people who are constantly placing notices with you, what are you doing to build on your relationship with them so they keep coming back to you?
Yep. And on the flip side of customers who place the most notice volume with you and maybe, have longstanding relationships, we also have, those invoices that are unpaid, right? And that is the aging invoices report, where you can find out exactly where those unpaid invoices are, who they belong to, and see which customers have the most and the total value of those invoices. So you can use that to follow up with customers. So similar to the other pages, I can compare, maybe there's a trend from last year that's the same as if I look at this year. And if I also see that multiple individuals in this page are under the same organization, then it'd be much more efficient for me to follow up with the organization directly rather than any individual within that organization. So this covers the aging invoices report. There are some additional options you should think about in general to help get those invoices paid that I wanted to point out outside of this financial reporting. So the first is invoice reminders. I'm just going to hop over to the organization settings real quick. Under invoice reminders, these are automatic notifications that Column sends for overdue invoices, and we recommend that you make sure that this is enabled. So we've heard from advertisers that they actually do rely on these notifications if they have a lot of notices to remind them. So their process might actually be to wait for the column email reminder to come, and then they'll pay. So if you have a large unpaid invoice, you can also send a reminder just for that one notice. But you can also, if you have these enabled, make sure that you're sending out these notifications. And by default, we send them the day after the past due date on the invoice, and then we start sending them every 7 days to help you get that invoice paid. Now, hopping back into the report, I just want to highlight a couple other options to consider if you haven't already. One is consider setting your invoices to require upfront payment if possible. Many advertisers do want to pay via a business card or ACH and complete that notice and invoice workflow in one go versus manually remembering to pay at a later date. So if this is an option for you and for your customers, having that enabled just helps rely on the tooling to help you enforce that payment to come through more quickly and reduce any kind of missed payments. And lastly, final tip to consider is that many advertisers do work with multiple newspapers, most of which are invoicing through column. So we've heard feedback from advertisers that it's actually difficult for them to manage invoices outside of column, especially when those are coming in via paper mail instead of digitally. So if you are interested in bringing that invoicing automation to column and haven't done so already, this can further streamline the process for advertisers and make it easier for them to pay in one place.
I think that this is probably the most important dashboard that we show because papers, as I mentioned before, papers can't afford their customers to not pay them. So this is really powerful to help you understand what you're owed by your customers. And as Iris kind of mentioned earlier, we have some settings within Column that can help you get paid faster, such as prepaying for that notice ahead of time when they're getting placed. And if you do have some troublesome customers that aren't paying, you can automatically hold their affidavits or even put their entire account on hold until they pay. And this is a good opportunity to plug next week's webinar, where we're going to be going over all of the different ways that you can customize settings for different customers, including invoicing settings. So if you're curious to learn more, tune in next week at the same time. But that largely covers the dashboards themselves. We've looked at our financial breakdown, our notices breakdown, our customers, and at all of our aging invoices. We're going to get to Q&A in a moment, so feel free to start sending questions over, and we will get to those in a second. And while those are rolling in, I also wanted to say that we are working on improving these dashboards. And one of the very first things that we're going to start rolling out is a forecasting tool, where actually you will be able to see an estimate of your future notice revenue. It's not quite ready yet, but as an attendee here, we'll make sure that you are part of the first group that gets access to that. So as I mentioned at the beginning, this is the first of a series of these webinars. Next week, we're going to be covering custom settings for individuals and organizations. And then after that, we're going to be covering our automated affidavit notarization tool. So if those are of any interest to you, please join those. Also, again, this was recorded, so please send it along to anyone who wasn't able to join that you think might enjoy this. And finally, to those of you who are current Column users, thank you so much for joining us. As always, please continue to use our team as a resource for your business. And to those of you who don't, please feel free to schedule an introductory call with one of our team members. Otherwise, that is all for the day. Thank you so much.